supposed to do this. So how do we get to the place where the Premier of Alberta is asking Albertans to vote about whether we want to stay in Canada? So you got to go back to, when Jason Kenney was in office. So Jason Kenney, in his time as the Premier and leader of the UCP, so certainly, hey, I was a health critic. So I had a lot of disagreements with him about his COVID policy and how lax he was in some areas. But there was a certain contingent of their party, folks who are on that far right, who were unhappy with what he did, felt he did too much, didn't want to have any restrictions, were very much against vaccinations and the vaccination passports and those sorts of things. So a guy named David Parker sort of organized all those angry people together into this organization called Take Back Alberta. And so they started on a campaign to kick Jason Kenney out as UCP leader. And they were successful, right? They Take Back Alberta. They then switched tactics. David Parker turned that whole operation around to supporting Danielle Smith. So those are the folks that went out and bought memberships in the UCP to vote in that race to make Danielle Smith the leader of the UCP and the new Premier of Alberta. They succeeded. She owes them favors. So these folks are now a hardcore part of the UCP base. At this point, polling shows, that over 50%, about I think 55% of the UCP members say they support Alberta separatism. So Danielle Smith is under a lot of political pressure. So we saw just over a year ago, during the spring's legislative session in 2025, she started changing the rules around citizens' initiatives. So citizen initiative petition, basically you get enough signatures on an approved petition, then you can force the government to either, examine and enact a policy or to hold a referendum on a question. So Jason Kenney set the thresholds on it for these petitions very high, which makes sense. It's expensive. We've got numbers now ranging from about 100 million to 130 million for this referendum we're going to be holding in October. So when you're spending that kind of money, you want to set your standards high, right? You don't want to make that too easy for people to do. So what we saw the UCP, Danielle Smith, do spring of last year is they cut the number of signatures required in half. And they doubled the length of time people have to collect them. So it's very clear that they were trying to pave the path to make it much, much easier. And it was very clear it was for the separatists that were sort of pushing politically to have this opportunity to push the question. Then we saw in the fall, they came back and they changed legislation again. Because what happened is when they wrote the law in the spring, they said, hey, it's a constitutional question. Chief Electoral Officer, he can send that to a judge to take a look at it and make sure, which also makes sense. If you're going to spend over $100 million to ask people a question, you should probably make sure it's a question that you can actually, on something you can do. Right? And so that's what the Chief Electoral Officer did. He got the separatist petition. He said, okay, this is pretty big, impacts First Nations and others. Probably have the courts look at it. He sent it to the courts. Danielle Smith and the Justice Minister were upset. So while that case was in front of the judge, they brought in changes to the bill that took that power away from the Chief Electoral Officer, that took out the section of the law that said, if you ask a question, it has to be constitutional, and they gave all that power to the Justice Minister. So before the law passed, the judge issued his ruling and said, nope, not constitutional, squash it. But then they passed the law, so the separatists brought the question back. And this time the Chief Electoral Officer can't do anything.
Has nothing about
Exactly. He has no powers. It doesn't have to be constitutional. Go ahead. So they went ahead then and they moved that through. So then they made some more changes sort of in the spring. So 3 times they changed legislation on the fly during the process in the space of a year because it was very, very clear Danielle Smith wanted to see them have this question on the ballot. Then, of course, First Nations challenged it in court. Because under the law, right, under the Constitution, if you're going to do anything that impacts First Nations,
you got to talk to them.
You have to consult with them. And I think drawing a new international boundary around the province of Alberta, that would affect First Nations. So they took it to court. There was 2 challenges. The first challenge got squashed. The judge said, nope, we don't support that one. Second challenge, the judge upheld it. Said, yeah. You can't do this until you consult with First Nations. You cannot put this question on the ballot. That was, I think, on Tuesday. And then she had already set up a television address on the Thursday where she intended to announce that there was going to be a separation, that 10th question, the separation question, on the ballot. So they were kind of stuck because the court said no. So that means they didn't have the cover anymore of saying, well, we didn't do it. Separatists just, somehow they managed to get the signatures. We changed the law 3 times. So what they ended up doing is they sort of took Thomas Lukaszik's questions, right? So Thomas Lukaczik had done it under the old rules, right, which required twice the signatures and all that stuff, and succeeded. He was trying to block a referendum. He just wanted us to vote on that in the legislature and be done with it. They twisted it, they torqued it, they had crazy committee meetings, and they squeezed it, and then the Premier went out and said, here, we're putting this on the ballot.